echoes of a failed universe. There are places in the cosmos that should have remained forgotten. Not out of fear, but out of mercy. Some universes don't collapse cleanly. They rot, they become trapped between what once was and what never should have been. But human curiosity does not respect the silence of the impossible. And so it was that, by accident or perhaps by the chaos itself, a portal was opened, a direct gateway to a universe that should no longer exist. Where physics breaks down, where reality grinds, and where space echoes with memories of something struggling to avoid oblivion. The excavation was silent. On the rocky desert of the abandoned moon, Cry 47, the scientists of Mission Orcus Prime expected only archaeological remnants of an extinct civilization. But when they scanned a fissure buried under ancient silicon, they detected a pulse, not thermal, not quantum, inexplicable. It was a code, repeated, 3 tones, a silence, and then a sigh. They followed the signal, dug deeper, and discovered the transition core, a spherical structure composed of matter that did not appear on any known periodic table, neither solid nor liquid. A material that remembered being, yet no longer was. Against protocol, they activated the interface. The environment froze for 0.8 seconds, not figuratively. Time stopped. Then the portal opened. Not with light. No spectacular visual distortion, but with absence. The wall of the universe sank away, revealing a black veil. Yet this black was not space. It was cosmic rust, a void that seemed to ooze with the weight of a reality that had forgotten how to exist. On the other side, no signs of life, only oscillating patterns, like the heartbeats of a corpse still dreaming. The team logged the moment as Event 0 failure, but one member, field physicist Taylor Hahn, wrote in his personal journal, just before crossing the threshold, "I don't know what we will find, but I feel this place was never meant to die in silence." And with that, the first human in ages stepped into the other side. Into a universe that refused to be remembered, but also refused to be forgotten. The first impression was silence, but not the familiar silence of known space where stars breathe in inaudible frequencies and planets drift in gravitational harmony. No, this was a discordant hush, as if the void itself was exhausted from existence. The Kestrelix passed through the veil effortlessly. No pressure change, no energy shift, just a sudden transition into a region where nothing seemed inclined to function as it should. Inside, instruments confused, response times erratic, impossible readings. Temperature wouldn't rise or fall, it hesitated. Starlight flickered backwards. Some stars glowed before appearing, others extinguished before vanishing. The color of space felt strange, neither black nor deep violet. It was rust-hued, as though the fabric of reality was oxidizing, crumbling into particles of lost memory. Crew members described it as damp, despite vacuum. Others smelled metallic, like dried blood. But what disturbed them most was time. Hours did not last the same. Thoughts stretched into days. Conversations echoed back, distorted and incomplete. It felt like being inside a universe abandoned by its fundamental laws, yet, somehow, it still functioned in a primitive way. They launched reconnaissance drones. They flew for minutes, then froze in midair, literally, as if motion continuity had been forgotten by space itself. And it was there, in that amorphous anomaly, that the first tangible visual sign appeared, a structure floating in the void, not anchored to anything, yet steady, as though space sustained it by memory rather than physics. Scanning it, the ship's systems autonomously decoded an impossible code, one predating the birth of our known universe. Scientist Adara Leem whispered, "This place was never meant to exist, but it does anyway, like an error that refuses to be deleted." Even more troubling, the structure seemed waiting. On the second cycle within the failed universe, the crew began detecting patterns not in corrupted data, but in their very senses. The first to speak was propulsion engineer Rico Vellon. During a walk in the observation capsule, he stared into the void and said, "I felt Something was looking back, initially dismissed as dimensional stress, a symptom of prolonged exposure to gravitational instability. Rico wasn't alone. In the following days, nearly all crew members reported the same sensation, being watched by something without eyes. External sensors captured subtle ripples in the space fabric, undulations not stemming from celestial bodies, but responding to the ship's movement, as if listening. While analyzing one of the gravitational loops around the floating structure, the scientists uncovered something impossible: an echo field. As if the ship's radios were being reflected before they were even sent a return from the future, or from a time older than time itself. And then came the sound. On the command deck, an unrequested frequency band appeared on monitors. No noise, no coded pattern. Just a delicate vibration seeping through walls and into minds. That night, the crew reported strange dreams, alone in impossible places, speaking unknown tongues, observed by something unmoving yet aware. Commander Sheeran Voss noted, "I don't know if it's life. I don't know if it's intelligence. But something here is trying to remember, and it's using us as a mirror." The team began to realize they weren't just observing a failed universe, they were being observed, perhaps. This place no longer wanted to be alone. The space around the Castrol X began behaving like a mind with memory lapses, not merely distorted nostalgic dots approaching the floating structure, a colossal form drifting in the void. The drones recorded architectural anomalies, spinning portals that never closed, corridors that looped into themselves, rooms that only existed when someone was looking. It seemed the matter of that universe had forgotten how to be space. Despite no thermal or electromagnetic signatures, each fragment appeared to register the crew's presence, a metal panel that didn't reflect, but when touched, played auditory memories, laughs from another life, voices of loved ones, sounds no one admitted to ever hearing. The ship identified traces of overlapping realities, fragments of spacetime struggling to hold shape, collapsing, and self-reforming into logical patterns. But always failing, Commander Voss described the sensation. It's like being inside the memory of something that forgot what it was, but desperately tries to remember being real. Around the central structure, the walls weren't solid, they were particles organized by the observer's intent. If feared, they appeared as walls. If observed curiously, they unfolded into paths. And when ignored, they vanished. It was as though space itself awaited emotional commands to shape itself, as though matter obeyed feelings rather than natural laws. At this point, the ship's logs began to erase themselves spontaneously. Mission journals vanished, personal identification data replaced by incoherent symbols. Among system failures, a single phrase periodically flashed: "IT is not forgetting. IT is absorption." The failed universe was not just an environment. It was a repository of echoes, a warped library where memories of what has been, and maybe what should never have been, fought to survive in any form they could. And by interacting with the ship, those memories found a new host. Then, calculations began to lie. The formulas sustaining navigation, regulated breathing, even the crew's heartbeats all began folding onto themselves. Not from human error, but something far more subtle. Physics was ceasing to function. A coffee floating inside the ship froze in midair, then boiled simultaneously. Clocks showed 12:47 on all stations. 2 minutes later, they still showed 12:47, but sensors reported 16 hours of brain activity in the crew. Time had detached from time. When they sent a drone to measure gravitational distortions near the floating structure, it vanished, but didn't disappear. It returned seconds later, covered in rust, as if aged millennia, and with it, a strange message, a transmission echo from the drone systems, in a metallic voice. "I've been here before, many times." The gravitational field oscillated like nervous waves. Mass fluctuated, particles refused to obey motion. Atoms flickered between solid and gas, as though reality was exhausted from maintaining form. Navigator Lyra Thal witnessed something unprecedented. She looked out the window and saw herself floating outside. For an instant, the duplicate stared back with pleading eyes, then dissolved silently like a memory erased out of shame. Inside the ship, voices began to delay. Words spoken by a crew member echoed 5 seconds later, as if sound were passing through broken layers of spacetime. A handwritten note appeared in the control room. If you're reading this, don't think. Thinking gives shape. Shape brings pain. Then, the life support system flickered. For exactly 3 seconds, the ship considered every crew member dead. Vital signs, 0. Pressure, 0. Presence, absent. But they were there, all of them, alive. Or at least ... still conscious. It was official. Reality was in degenerative collapse. This wasn't about surviving the universe. It was about not being corrupted by it. Because physics, there, was no longer a law. It was an opinion. At the center of the distorted labyrinth, where physics had long stopped pretending to function, there was something ... intact. A spherical chamber floated above a platform connected to nothing. No wires, no anchoring fields. It simply floated, held up by a gravity that seemed to remember how to behave out of politeness. Inside it, visible through translucent layers of frozen kinetic matter, was the entity. It did not move, did not breathe, but it was alive, or, at least, preserved in some state between being and remembering having been. Its body had no clear contours, as if it had been shaped by all species at once. And none. Arms that bent in impossible directions. A face that changed expression without moving. But the most disturbing part was its gaze. Even motionless, the entity looked at everyone. At the same time, when one of the crew members, linguist and cryptographer Eldrin Var, tried to approach, the field around the chamber responded, not with force, but with memory. Eldrin collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed by a flood of images that were not his. Wars fought in extinguished stars, cities built on seas of liquid time, voices begging for a final witness. The entity then blinked, only once, and in that blink, every clock on the ship reset. The systems lost track of time since entering the universe, as if that tiny, so impossible gesture rebooted their perception of reality. Commander Voss ordered retreat, but it was too late. The ship now orbited the structure as if caught in an emotional field, not gravitational, a bond of attention, of reciprocity. The entity, it seemed, did not wish to escape. It had been left there, or chosen to remain. An anchor of memory, the final witness of what could no longer be told. And in that moment, every crew member knew. It wasn't a prisoner. It was the universe itself, attempting to keep its memory alive. They tried to decipher it, but there was no code, no language. The entity did not speak, at least, not in the way sound functions. Still, something was being said. Not in words, but in absences. Lights blinking out of sync. Gravitational patterns repeating like the heartbeat of a forgotten body. Images forming, through monitor glitches, figures that only appeared when no one looked directly at the screen. The communication happened in the intervals, in the silences, in the system errors that could no longer be called accidental. Cryptographer Eldrin Var observed a sequence of radar interference. It occurred whenever he thought of something specific: home, loss, fear. As if the universe itself were listening. And replying with emotional static. During a particularly dense moment, the ship's AI froze and displayed a single word across all monitors, written in a dead language: remain. But no one remembered programming that language. It didn't exist in any database. In fact, no one knew how it was even readable, yet everyone understood. The echoes intensified, no longer isolated glitches, but a structured language formed by collapse. Every flicker of light, every audio distortion, every misplaced shadow, all were part of a desperate attempt to be understood. It was a living language. But degenerated. A tongue crafted by a universe that no longer knew how to form words, but still felt. And so the crew began to realize They weren't just listening. They were being shaped to comprehend. The space around the Kestrel X was not observing them. It was training them, transforming them into vessels of memory, living echoes of what was once everything, and now was only noise. The first failures didn't strike the ship's systems. They hit the mind, minor memory gaps, a forgotten name here, an unfinished task there. But soon, entire pieces of identity unraveled. Pilot Eamon forgot his birth date. The chief engineer wrote her brother's name in her journal, and minutes later didn't recognize the letters. Commander Voss awoke one morning and asked the crew, "Where are we? And who are you?" In her eyes, terror. Not fear of death, but the panic of not knowing whether she was still herself. Mission. Files began overwriting themselves. Videos of past meetings were replaced by footage from other places, with other voices. Some familiar, some completely foreign. In one clip, the crew watched what looked like a recording of the ship's destruction while they were still alive inside it. And the strangest part, no one could tell if it had already happened, or if it was going to. It was as if the universe was rewriting them, erasing what didn't matter, replacing memories with experiences that weren't theirs, but needed a body to live in. Aldrin, the cryptographer, was the first to break. He spent 3 hours staring at the wall in his quarters. Without blinking, when asked, he said, "I am not Aldrin. I was someone before. Now I am ... a recording. Something trying to remember, but I no longer know what." That night, the crew heard something coming from the walls of the ship, whispers, but not out loud. Inside their minds, short phrases, loose words, story fragments. As if the ship or the universe itself was trying to use their minds as paper. They were being corroded, not by radiation, not by temporal pressure, but by foreign memories, orphaned memories of a failed universe, now trying to survive inside any mind that dared listen. It was the silence that forced their decision. After weeks, or what felt like weeks, in that broken time, the signal stopped. The entity, once unmoving yet perceptible, vanished from the floating chamber. It hadn't fled. It simply wasn't there anymore. The universe now treated them with indifference, as if it had already taken everything it needed, as if they were disposable. Linguist Aldrin had been confined. He no longer spoke, only drew circular symbols on the walls. Commander Voss, though lucid, admitted she could no longer remember her daughter's face, and out of 12 crew members, 3 no longer recognized their own names, but the ship could still leave. The portal, surprisingly, remained open. Like a scar that wouldn't close, the onboard AI estimated a 64% chance of successfully crossing the threshold back to the original universe, but a larger dilemma loomed. What would they bring back with them? Would they be themselves, or contaminated echoes? Empty vessels carrying memories from a failed universe. Dr. Yara Men, a non-linear physics expert, proposed closing the portal for good. Not exiting, sealing. She believed the failed universe wasn't just a glitch, it was an unfinished process, an entity that needed to be forgotten so it wouldn't grow, something that fed on observers. If we leave without sealing it, she said, it will follow us, not as a place, but as an idea. Closing the portal, however, meant leaving part of themselves behind, the contaminated memories, the physical distortions, the fragments that no longer belonged to the world they came from. And more than that, it meant abandoning the only concrete proof that reality can fail. What is more dangerous, to forget that something exists, or to remember that it is possible? The decision had to be made, and there would be only one chance. They chose to stay. Not for heroism, not for sacrifice, but because there was no longer any certainty that leaving was even possible. The portal remained open, but upon observing it, they noticed a disturbing detail. The image of the original universe was no longer the same. The stars on the other side looked ... copied, imprecise, as if the reflection of the real world was being imitated by something that had only heard rumors of it. Perhaps the failed universe had already begun trying to escape before they did, and each second spent there ... was permission. Commander Vorse issued the final log. We don't know what we are now. If any pure fragments remain in us ... or if we've become an extension of this place. But we know that returning like this would spread the error like a silent disease. So we chose to stay and contain. Dr. Men activated the final protocol, a reverse gravity pulse, designed to collapse the entry point from the inside out. Not to destroy the failed universe, but to isolate it. To lock it in the only prison it respected. Oblivion. The portal consumed them in silence, and closed. No explosions, no light, no witnesses. In the original universe, only silence remained. The mission was classified as lost due to communication failure, but at remote stations, old sensors still sometimes pick up strange pulses, echoes of patterns that do not repeat, sounds without origin, whispers that speak names of people who were never born. And one question haunts the few who still study the event. What if the failed universe wasn't a mistake? What if it was a warning? After all, some things do not want to be remembered. But still ... they whisper,